or feel more powerful, things that to us, in the modern world, sound disgusting, even insane. But to ancient emperors of China, power wasn't just about armies or walls. It was about the body. A weak emperor meant a weak dynasty. And in a culture where every gesture was loaded with meaning, even a whisper about male weakness could undermine an entire throne. So how do you solve that problem when you're the emperor of the richest empire on earth? You don't go to a doctor, you don't admit weakness, and you certainly don't let rumors spread. Instead, you do something bold, outrageous, something that screams dominance. You eat a tiger's testicles. It sounds like a sick joke, but it meant you were rubbing shoulders with the untouchables, men whose wealth allowed them to quite literally eat what others could only fear. But here's the darker side. Tigers were vanishing. By the Ming and Qing dynasties, reports already showed tiger numbers collapsing under hunting pressure. This didn't stop the demand. It only made it more valuable. The rarer the tiger, the stronger people thought its powers must be. That's the twisted psychology of scarcity. When something becomes nearly impossible to obtain, humans desire it even more. Now pause for a moment. Imagine being in that dining hall. A bowl is placed before you. Steam rises, the broth glistens, and you know what's floating inside it. The courtiers watch silently. The concubines peek behind screens. Everyone waits for you to take the first sip. Do you feel disgust, shame, or power? The emperor would raise the spoon, sip the broth, chew the organ, and in that act, he wasn't just nourishing his body, he was fueling a legend. The idea that his strength came not only from heaven's mandate, but from the flesh of the fiercest predator on earth. This is where the story becomes more unsettling. Many of these emperors were deeply insecure men. Behind the robes and ceremonies, they were paranoid about betrayal, terrified of illness, constantly testing their virility with dozens of concubines. Eating tiger testicles wasn't just medicine, it was psychological armor. It gave them confidence. And sometimes, confidence is as powerful as any drug. What's most fascinating is that we're not talking about fringe practices. These were state-sanctioned meals, served at imperial banquets, discussed in medical texts, and carried out for centuries. From the Tang dynasty through the Qing, the idea persisted. To be like a tiger, you must consume a tiger. Even today, echoes of this belief linger. Black markets across Asia still sell powdered tiger parts, claiming miraculous cures. People are still willing to pay small fortunes for something that science has proven worthless, because the story, the myth, the ancient prestige attached to it is stronger than reason. The real question isn't, why do they eat tiger testicles? The real question is, why do humans, across all cultures, keep turning to bizarre, grotesque remedies when faced with weakness? Because weakness terrifies us. It makes us feel mortal. And sometimes we'd rather believe in magic, no matter how grotesque, than face our fragility. History books often present emperors as untouchable, almost godlike. But if you peel away the ceremonies, the jade thrones, the armies bowing in reverence, you find something startlingly human. Fear. Fear of losing control, fear of growing old, fear of failing in the one area no ruler ever wanted whispered about, his potency. In Chinese history, the body of the emperor was the body of the empire. His vitality symbolized the stability of the dynasty itself. A sickly ruler was an omen. A weak ruler was an invitation for rebellion. And in an age before antibiotics, before modern science, rulers leaned heavily on symbolism and ritual to protect their strength. That's why eating tiger testicles was more than food. It was a performance of invincibility. Let's step into the Ming Dynasty around the 15th century. This was a time when China was bursting with wealth, trade, and art. The Forbidden City had just been completed, a sprawling labyrinth where the emperor ruled from behind walls so high most citizens never even glimpsed his shadow. Yet inside those walls, palace physicians scribbled prescriptions that would shock us today, Stew the genitals of the tiger with ginseng and deer antler. Boil in rice wine. Serve warm to replenish yang energy. The belief system was simple but deeply rooted. Yang was the masculine energy, hot, powerful, active. Anything that could restore yang was considered vital for male health. A tiger, the apex predator of the Asian wilderness, was seen as the ultimate embodiment of yang. Its roar could be heard for miles, its strength legendary, its ferocity unmatched. So, of course, consuming its reproductive organs was thought to flood the body with unstoppable masculine force. But this wasn't just medicine, it was ritual. The preparation of tiger testicles was an event. They weren't casually tossed into a pot. No, the dish had to be prepared with sacred precision. First, the testicles were dried or boiled, sometimes marinated in wine. Special herbs like cordyceps, goji berries, or ginseng might be added, all chosen to amplify vitality. Then, in a broth heavy with rice wine, the organ was simmered until tender. The aroma was earthy, bitter, pungent, a far cry from the refined delicacies we associate with imperial banquets. Imagine the psychological theater. The emperor seated at the head of the banquet, dozens of dishes spread across the table, but all eyes drawn to this one bowl. To the court, it wasn't just food, it was evidence of heaven's mandate embodied in flesh. When the emperor ate, he wasn't just nourishing himself, he was consuming power. And there's another layer: secrecy and exclusivity. The average farmer in Hunan would never see such a dish in his lifetime. Tigers were rare, dangerous, and almost mythical to common people. To hear that their ruler had consumed the essence of such a beast elevated the emperor to a nearly divine status. He was not only ruler of men, he was master of nature itself. Now, here's where it gets even more fascinating. The emperors weren't alone in this. Nobles, generals, and wealthy merchants also bought into the myth. There are records of banquet menus from the Qing dynasty where wealthy hosts served tiger meat or testicle stew to impress their guests. In those moments, eating wasn't about hunger, it was about prestige. It said, "I am powerful enough to eat what others fear." But the darker truth was unfolding in the forests. Tigers were being slaughtered at alarming rates. By the late imperial era, tiger populations across China were collapsing. Yet, paradoxically, this only increased their value. A dish that was already rare became nearly priceless. It's a pattern you see again and again in human history. The rarer something becomes, the more people convince themselves it holds supernatural power. This obsession wasn't confined to the testicles alone. Tiger bones were ground into powders and soaked in wine, believed to strengthen bones and heal arthritis. The penis of the tiger was steeped into broths for stamina. The whiskers, claws, and teeth were carried as talismans. Every inch of the animal was commodified into some form of magic. But the testicles carried the ultimate weight, because in the psychology of men who ruled, virility was not just personal, it was political. Think of the pressure. An emperor was expected to father heirs with multiple concubines. Some emperors had harems of hundreds of women. To fail in the bedroom wasn't just a private embarrassment, it was a matter of state. If an emperor was impotent, rumors could spread like wildfire, shaking the confidence of the entire dynasty. That's why eating tiger testicles wasn't just indulgence, it was survival. Of course, modern science tells us this was all placebo. Tiger testicles contain no magical compounds to boost virility or stamina. But here's the twist: psychology is powerful. If an emperor believed it would work, that belief alone could reduce his anxiety, boost his confidence, and maybe even improve performance. In that sense, the ritual did work. Not because of biology, but because of belief. And belief is often stronger than truth. The practice became so ingrained that even after tigers became endangered, the idea persisted. Manuals of traditional medicine continued to list tiger genitals as potent remedies. Merchants risked their lives hunting the last tigers in southern China, smuggling their parts into cities where desperate men would pay fortunes. And while emperors disappeared with the fall of dynasties, the myth of tiger virility refused to die. Now, step back and think. What does it say about human beings that we are willing to drive an animal to the edge of extinction just to chew on a piece of flesh we believe will make us stronger? It's not really about the tiger. It's about us. Our fear of weakness, our desperation to feel immortal, our obsession with proving masculinity through rituals no matter how bizarre. That's the uncomfortable truth the emperors never admitted, but every bite revealed. They weren't just eating tiger testicles. They were eating away at their own fear. When you picture an emperor of China, you probably imagine silk robes, dragon thrones, armies of attendants bowing at his command. But imagine this same man, feared by millions, guarded by walls of stone, sitting nervously as a steaming bowl of tiger testicle stew was placed before him. It's here that the myth turns into reality, because we actually have records of specific emperors who indulged in this bizarre practice. Take Emperor Jiajing of the Ming Dynasty, 16th century. He was obsessed with immortality and longevity, surrounding himself with alchemists who promised potions and rituals to keep him young and virile forever. Jiajing notoriously consumed exotic animal parts, rhino horn, bear bile, deer penis, and yes, tiger organs. His court physicians wrote prescriptions steeped in Taoist symbolism. Eat of the tiger's essence to restore yang and prolong the dragon's flame. To him, these meals weren't eccentricities, they were lifelines. Then there's Emperor Qianlong of the Qing Dynasty, 18th century, one of the longest-reigning emperors in Chinese history. Though remembered for his poetry and art, Qianlong also indulged in traditional medicine. Records from his court kitchens show requests for tiger meat, alongside rare herbs and deer velvet. In his era, eating tiger testicles was framed not just as medicine, but as a statement. The emperor was a man of unmatched vigor, still commanding his palace well into old age. And here's the interesting twist. While emperors ate in secret, the court spread the stories deliberately. Ministers, concubines, generals, they whispered about what the Son of Heaven had consumed. Why? Because it created a myth. If the emperor was seen as strong, virile, and nearly superhuman, it kept the bureaucracy in line. Who would rebel against a man said to carry the power of the tiger in his blood? But let's pause here and think about the psychology of belief. If an emperor sat down convinced that this strange dish would restore his manhood, what do you think happened? He felt stronger. He felt more confident. And confidence is often half the battle. We call it placebo now, but back then, it was simply power of faith. This belief wasn't confined to the Forbidden City. It filtered down to society at large. Wealthy nobles and merchants imitated the emperors, serving tiger testicles at banquets to show off their power. Imagine being a guest at such a feast. Before you even tasted the food, you were already told, this is the flesh of the tiger, king of beasts. By the time it touched your lips, your mind had already convinced you it was extraordinary. For the common people, who could never dream of affording such rarities, the story itself became part of folklore. Rural villages told tales of hunters who ate tiger parts and gained unnatural strength. Parents warned their children not to insult the tiger, for it carried spirits too powerful to anger. The emperor's meal became a cultural myth that shaped how ordinary Chinese viewed both animals and authority. But not everyone was convinced. In the Qing dynasty, some Confucian scholars criticized these practices. They argued that medicine should rely on balance, not superstition, and that the killing of tigers weakened the natural order. Yet those voices were often drowned out, because emperors are not about to let go of rituals that promise them virility and control. The rituals themselves grew more elaborate with time. In some courts, tiger testicles weren't just eaten, they were ceremoniously presented. The chef would announce the dish, invoking blessings of strength and longevity, as the court bowed in silence. Some records describe tiger testicles being served alongside wine infused with powdered bone, creating a symbolic union. The organ for potency, the bone for strength. Eating them together was thought to merge two powers into one body. But here's the darker truth. This obsession was slowly killing the tiger population across China. By the 19th century, tigers that once roamed freely across vast stretches of Asia had been hunted to near extinction in many regions. And why? Not because people needed food, but because men at the top of the social ladder needed to prove something about themselves. And the paradox here is striking. These emperors commanded armies, collected tributes from vast provinces, and were worshipped as sons of heaven. Yet they were so terrified of weakness in their own bodies that they turned to a bowl of stew for reassurance. It's a reminder that power doesn't erase insecurity, it often magnifies it. There's another story worth mentioning, this one from outside the palace walls. In the late 19th century, as Westerners began entering China more frequently, travelers recorded with shock the markets where animal parts were sold. Missionaries wrote about stalls where dried tiger penises, testicles, and bones were openly advertised as remedies for male stamina. One missionary described watching a wealthy Chinese man hand over a small fortune for a pouch of tiger organs, which he planned to boil at home. To outsiders, it looked like barbaric superstition. But to the locals, it was tradition, a piece of cultural identity that stretched back centuries. And here's the cruel irony. By then, photography and newspapers had begun circulating globally. Western readers laughed at what they saw as Oriental oddities, mocking Chinese traditions as backward. What they didn't see was the parallel in their own culture. In Europe at the very same time, wealthy men were swallowing ground-up rhinoceros horn, drinking elixirs made of crushed beetles, or rubbing snake oil onto their bodies, all for the exact same reason: fear of weakness. The tiger was simply China's chosen symbol of potency, and in a way, it made sense. To ancient Chinese eyes, what creature could embody masculine ferocity better than the tiger? Stronger than the ox, faster than the horse, more feared than the wolf. The tiger was the perfect metaphor for virility. By eating it, men hoped to swallow its very spirit. Still, not every emperor trusted it blindly. Records show some emperors rejecting exotic prescriptions altogether, relying instead on meditation, Taoist breathing exercises, and herbal tonics. But those stories were less exciting, less mythic. The tales that stuck were the ones where rulers ate tiger testicles and lived to father dozens of children. And maybe that's the real secret. People don't remember facts, they remember stories. A bowl of tiger testicles wasn't just food, it was a story you could tell about yourself. I ate what others feared. I consumed the strength of the beast. And that story, more than any chemical compound, was the real source of power. History has a way of swallowing its own myths. What once seemed eternal, the emperor's table, the rituals of the forbidden city, the hush that fell when a steaming bowl of tiger testicles was presented, eventually collapsed under the weight of time. But the traces never fully disappeared. When the Qing dynasty began to crumble in the 19th century, the old rituals lost some of their grandeur. The emperors were still served their exotic feasts, but the empire itself was cracking apart. Famines, foreign invasions, corruption. Suddenly, no one cared if the emperor had the stamina of a tiger when he couldn't stop British gunboats or peasant uprisings. Still, in those waning days of imperial power, tiger testicles remained on some royal menus, almost as if the emperors clung to them like lifebuoys, convincing themselves that virility could somehow translate into political strength. Yet, as dynasties fell, the practice did not vanish completely. Instead, it slipped underground, preserved in markets, folk medicine shops, and whispered traditions. In the countryside, herbalists still offered tiger parts as cures for impotence or weakness. In wealthier households, old recipes were passed down like treasured secrets, proof that one's ancestors had tasted what only emperors once could. But history is cruelly ironic. By the late 1800s, photography and journalism had given the outside world a lens into these practices. Western newspapers published sensational sketches of Chinese men feasting on the tiger's loins. These depictions were exaggerated, but they fed into a narrative of Orientalism, a way of portraying China as exotic, grotesque, and backward. And yet, if we peel back the smugness, Europe and America were guilty of the same habits. Apothecaries in London sold elixirs made of animal organs, claiming to restore youth. In America, advertisements promised beef extract and tonics that were nothing more than flavored alcohol. Human beings, across cultures, were united by the same fear: aging, impotence, the slow erosion of vitality. Still, the tiger was unique. In China, the tiger was not merely an animal. It was a cosmic symbol. Ancient Taoist writings describe the tiger as the earthly counterpart to the dragon. The dragon ruled the heavens. The tiger ruled the earth. Together, they balanced yin and yang. To consume the tiger was to ingest the very essence of earthly yang energy, believed to ignite the body's masculine fire. That symbolism carried a heavy cost. By the 20th century, tigers that once roamed the forests of southern and northeastern China had been hunted to the edge of extinction. They were killed not just for their testicles, but for their bones, skins, and penises, all of which were believed to carry power. Some hunters even recorded imperial orders to bring back tigers for palace kitchens or medicinal stockpiles. And so the emperor's superstition became a death sentence for the tiger species itself. But what's perhaps most haunting is that the myth outlived the empire. When the last emperor, Huai, was dethroned in 1912, the Forbidden City stopped serving tiger dishes. Yet outside those walls, demand continued. Even in the early People's Republic of China, despite campaigns against feudal superstition, secret trade in tiger parts persisted. Some doctors, both licensed and folk, still prescribed them, invoking the authority of ancient wisdom. And here's the twist. Even as modern science advanced, even as labs discovered that tiger testicles contain no special compounds for virility, the belief did not die. Why? Because it wasn't about chemistry. It was about psychology, culture, and the eternal human craving for power over time and weakness. In truth, what emperors ate was not just flesh. It was hope, ritualized and consumed with trembling hands. But think about the paradox. The same emperors who ruled vast empires, who could order the deaths of thousands with a word, were still so insecure in their own flesh that they sought validation in a bowl of stew. It's a chilling reminder of how fragile even the most powerful men can be. Strength on the battlefield or in the palace meant nothing if their own bodies betrayed them. There's another layer here too, the layer of propaganda. By eating tiger testicles, emperors projected an image of unassailable masculinity. Whether or not it worked didn't matter. What mattered was that the story was told, repeated, and believed. The people didn't need proof, they needed myth. And myth is often more powerful than truth. And then there is the modern shadow. Today, conservationists fight tirelessly against the illegal trade in tiger parts. Yet black markets still thrive in parts of Asia. Tiger testicles, penises, bones, they are sold at astronomical prices, sometimes to wealthy men who still believe the same things emperors once did. The story lives on, stripped of its imperial setting, carried forward by whispers of ancient power. If you look closely, you'll notice the same psychological cycle repeating. A man feels weakness, age, impotence, fatigue. Instead of trusting medicine, he reaches for myth, because myth promises not just healing, but identity. To eat what emperors ate is to taste history itself, to borrow strength from the ghosts of kings. Science tells us it's useless. Psychology tells us it's inevitable. But the strangest irony? The emperors who consumed tiger testicles in secret, hiding their fears behind golden walls, have now become cautionary tales. Their rituals are no longer symbols of strength, but of fragility, proof that even the mighty were ruled by superstition. And so we arrive at the unsettling truth. The story of emperors eating tiger testicles is not really about tigers. It's about us, about human beings, whether kings or commoners, grappling with mortality. It's about the lies we tell ourselves to stay strong, the lengths we go to avoid weakness, and the myths we create to disguise our fear of death. In the end, the emperors died like everyone else. Their bowls of stew, their rituals, their tiger feasts. None of it could stop time. The Forbidden City is now a museum, its kitchens silent, its walls echoing only with tourist footsteps. The tiger itself is endangered, a ghost of the forests it once ruled. And the emperors? Their names remain in history, but their desperate meals are remembered only as curiosities, bizarre footnotes in the chronicles of power. But maybe that's why the story still matters. Because in every age, in every culture, we find men and women reaching for something impossible. Immortality, eternal strength, freedom from weakness. The emperors chose tiger testicles. Others chose elixirs, potions, surgeries, or diets. We all choose something. And maybe centuries from now, future generations will look back at us with the same mix of horror and fascination, wondering why we believe in the myths we do today. So the next time you hear about emperors eating tiger testicles, don't laugh too quickly. Ask yourself, what myths are we swallowing right now in our own desperate bid to stay young, strong, and untouchable?